Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Valoppi. I'm the founder of the Women of Tomorrow Mentor and Scholarship Program. Women of Tomorrow works to uplift the lives of at-risk young women in public high schools by teaching life skills and pathways out of poverty. I've been in the television business for almost 30 years now as a television newscaster in New York, Los Angeles, and Miami. And so the Jennifer Valoppi podcast brings it all pretty much full circle for me. I want to make the life-changing content, like we teach at Women of Tomorrow, available to women of all ages, everywhere, anytime. This show exists to share honest conversations and meaningful stories about turning obstacles into opportunities and about helping you become the person that you've always dreamed of. It's all about women helping women. And I want to bring in Sarah Feil Lewin now. Sarah, it's so great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And, you know, when people talk about hedge funds, we'll start at the beginning of your career. I don't know if a lot of people really know, especially young women. Do they know what a hedge fund is? Can you define that for us?
Certainly. So the long and the short of it is, no pun intended, hedge funds are investing long and short across the capital markets. Capital markets can be everything from stocks, bonds, corporate credits that corporations issue, and it can be the derivatives of them as well. So meaning you can take leverage, borrow money, and maybe go longer or shorter any of those instruments.
So working at a hedge fund, what was that like in a very male-dominated business, right? What was that like for you? What kind of obstacles? Do you think you faced more obstacles as a woman than the men did?
Certainly, and a great question, because when I graduated, there were even fewer women than there are today. And still, yes, it is a male-dominated industry. And I've many funny anecdotes. I remember early on in my career wanting to, be taken seriously in both, of course, content, but also in posture. And I remember practicing superwoman pose so that I could be seen and heard equally to men. So yes, on the one hand, of course, if you are in the right environment and you are, proving your worth, in other words, performing well, you will be taken seriously. Nonetheless, there are obstacles because there are less of you. And so men and women are different for many good reasons at this. So you need to assimilate. I certainly did that, but I also use my femininity and the fact that I was a woman to my advantage. And part of that was the career path I chose within the hedge fund industry.
Okay, so explain that, because you were in charge of going out and getting new clients, right?
Exactly. So ultimately I ran business development for a number of hedge funds. All business development means is you are helping to literally develop the business. That means you are working with clients, sourcing clients. My clients were not a retail customer, but they were pension funds, public pension funds. Public pension fund is simply, the state of Illinois. They have, teachers, when they are working, they have a pension, and then all those pensioners, their assets are aggregated, and then that's given back to them. And so the pension is investing those assets on their behalf, so they have a retirement. So that, clients like that, endowments, foundations. And when I say I use my femininity and the fact that I was a woman to my advantage, it's all about creating a relationship. Yes, you have to have financial know-how. You need to understand the product well. You need to understand the financials markets well. But in terms of being able to explain that to a pension fund, to an endowment, to a foundation, but again, these are just people. I think the fact that my skill set, which included being able to relate to people, meet people where they're at, find common ground, be able to speak about something very complex in plain spoken terms, worked to my advantage and helped me.
Yeah, and women do tend to be better at that. But when you talk about relationships, I think it's also really about trust.
Yeah.
Did you find maybe as a woman you were more trusted than some of the men would be?
I think that's true, just simply because, again, you can relate. I found that I could relate to people better, but I also think that's a female trait, being able to, again, find something in common with another person, being able to speak about, kitchen table issues to financial literacy issues to how are we going to create a better portfolio for you.
Right. So what were some of the obstacles you ran into?
I remember early on in my days when I started out actually at a large asset management firm, and there were, at that point in time, probably 7/8 of the organization were men, and so there were certainly situations where I was in a room where the guys could relate on whether it's a certain subject matter or just talk in a certain way, even just the everyday rhetoric. And on the one hand, you do, like I said earlier, you want to be able to assimilate. You want to be able to talk the talk.
Right.
On the other hand, it may not necessarily be a subject matter that is applicable to being a woman, right? Like, let's use an example of, well, maybe everybody's going to go out and, play soccer and then go to the bar together and,
Watch
and
football.
watch football. And I actually enjoy football. I'm a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. I grew up in the Midwest, so I could relate to them on that. But yeah, go out and play football, right? That is not something typically women necessarily want to do
Right.
or excel at.
Did you find they use those sorts of things to maybe keep you out of certain circles?
I don't think any of it was intentional. I do think that it does. It certainly it puts you in a situation where you're left out of that bonding moment, right? I've also been in situations where, I remember very vividly during one review period where I had just every year there's an annual review, just like in probably in many industries, right? Where you've done your work for the year, they review you, and you receive a potential bonus. And I had just had probably one of my best years ever. I had raised over $1 billion from pension funds, endowments, and foundations. It was really, really good year. And I remember receiving positive feedback on that. But at the end of it, my boss said to me, I think the skirt you're wearing is a little too short. And I felt certainly uncomfortable about that. But it also quickly occurred to me, I don't think they're making the same comments to my male peers.
True, but on the other hand, men are wearing pants, and unless they're wearing something kind of appropriate in a suit, women have so much more leeway with fashion.
They do.
That's one, that's another way of looking at it too. Like, I always wonder sometimes when we talk about being discriminated against or different forms of sexual harassment and stuff like that. If somebody tells you your skirt is too short, they're probably not sexually harassing you. That's the good news there, right?
I think if they wanted to sexually harass you, they could do something much more egregious.
Right. That would not be the thing,
No.
But the sensibilities are different. I mean, all my years in television, it's like, the number of fan mail or calls or whatever that I used to get about my hair, if I changed my hair or if I changed my hair color. And they certainly weren't calling my co-anchors and telling them, I don't like the color of your hair, or I don't like your new haircut, or
right.
I don't like your blowout, or whatever it was.
That's right.
Or your suit. But that is something that both men and women do to women, right? And don't do to men. So it's an interesting it's an interesting thing to do. But you didn't take offense to that, did you?
No, I didn't take offense to it. It just made me pause. It
Right.
made me pause, and I thought, well, I wonder if my male peers are being judged in the same way. And, I think, I am women. There are many advantages to being a woman.
Right.
There are many advantages to being male. And I don't think one necessarily outweighs the other.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, however, your performance and your content matter the most.
Well, I do, in just in a little bit of fairness, I do remember going to one of my news directors one time and saying I had a new co-anchor, and he was wearing all these like blue shirts and with a tie and suit and beige shirts and stuff like that. And I went to the news director and I said, you got to tell him white shirts only, no more. I don't want blue shirts on my co-anchor. I mean, I do remember saying that one time. So, depending on
The situation.
whatever, depending on the situation, I guess that can sort of go both ways. You actually raised like $2.5 billion over your career in investor capital, right?
I did, yes.
You've got to have a thick skin to do that to be in that kind of a fundraising capacity, right?
You do, absolutely. And I think that's probably true for any career, but being able to feel okay with being told, no, this is not, this actually isn't going to be the right investment for us, or, this isn't going, whatever the hurdle is, whatever the
Right.
obstacle is, sometimes you can't overcome that. And then how do you pivot and or just be comfortable with the fact that you're not going to be told that this is the right thing all the time. So yes, I did have to have a thick skin.
Hedge funds invest in riskier investments,
They
right?
they do, right. So if you think about the stock market, right, the largest public market in the world, um, you can invest in single name stocks, you could invest in the index, and then what hedge funds do is they're trying to go both long and short. Again, they could also use leverage, but they're trying to take on a riskier strategy such that they're outperforming, a bond
Right.
index or an equity index. Absolutely.
So how is it when they're making such risky investments or riskier investments that hedge funds make so much money?
Well, they don't always make money.
Right. True.
And that's also a challenge, which is if your hedge fund isn't making money,
Right.
making sure that you are doing what's in the best interest of your firm, but also in what's in the best interest of your client. Um, so how do they make so much money? Because if they're really good at it, they're creating what's often referred to as alpha, right? So they are
Okay.
understanding that, okay, maybe we're going to invest in there's a capital structure. I won't get into too much detail on this, but there's a capital structure in any sort of credit structure. And so maybe they invest in the senior part of the capital structure, and maybe they're going to short the bottom part of this capital structure. Or maybe they're going to invest in a certain type of equity, let's go long the financial market, the financial subsector, and we're going to go short the tech sector, although you certainly don't want to do that in today.
Yeah.
So things like that. And then it gets even more complex because of course there are derivatives that there's whole other markets that have been created off
Right.
of these products as well.
Well, you were also around during the Bernie Madoff years, right?
I was, yeah.
What did that do to the industry?
The Bernie Madoff period was certainly challenging, though it had come after the 2007, 2008 big market sell-off, and that certainly shook the industry even more. The Bernie Madoff, though, was challenging for our industry, mostly because, as you mentioned earlier, so much of this is about trust.
Right.
And you can do all the due diligence you want as an investor, but of course there's some leap of faith. And I think what was most troublesome to the industry is that these were, major endowments, major, foundations, less so on the pension fund side, private individuals, but who had, put trust into Bernie Madoff. And a lot of this was word of mouth. And for them to, then learn that it was all really nothing was troubling.
Well, how is it that he got away with this, do you think, for all these years? I mean, how is it he had so many amazing clients? How is it he had all of these incredible clients and everything else and did this for so many years and nobody ever caught on?
There were certainly signs that there was, trouble under the hood, so to speak. As it's, reasonably well documented now, there were reports made to the SEC and other governing bodies. In fact, the SEC had come in and done an audit and found no wrongdoing. But I think because, again, so much of this is based upon trust, when you have XYZ endowment who's made an investment, and again, because he had been falsely marking his books, he wasn't actually investing any capital.
Right.
It looked good for so many years, and people, endowments, foundations, they need returns to be able to fund their school or their foundation or whatever it is. And so if after a number of years you continue to have these very impressive compounded returns, people, eventually some capitulate, and in conjunction with the fact they've been told by their endowment peer, look, we've been invested for 6, 7, 8 years, and look at the returns we've been making. But it, ultimately was a pyramid scheme, and the cards fell.
Ultimately, it's greed.
It is greed. Yes, it was greed. It was
No, but
also an immoral, very big moral lapse in judgment, of course.
but nobody who's making money wants to think that they're making it the wrong way.
Of course not. No, certainly not.
So as long as they're getting paid, it's okay.
I think that's right. I mean, the further troubling aspect of this, I should say, is that obviously an endowment and a foundation and a pension fund, for that matter, they have a fiduciary obligation to their constituents. Their constituents
Yeah,
being, again, the school or their pensioners.
right.
And so that that was all the more concerning because there was a real fallout, and now suddenly this foundation cannot fund their programming.
Yeah. And what about 2008? What about when the market crashed in 2008? I mean, I personally remember a lot of that,
Yeah.
and that was really a devastating time for a lot of people. How did that rock, Wall Street, the financial world, really?
Yeah, it was that really very, I mean, that's really the last major disruption we've had in the financial markets. And
Hmm.
it was earlier on in my career. So in some ways, I, it was a fortunate time for it to occur. Not that I, would hope this upon any of the financial markets, but, you know, it was a less, this, the 2008 crisis is a function of the leverage in the financial markets and lending money to at the time what they were called as subprime properties. So these are
Hmm.
properties that were had low credit quality, and then people were created products where they could put leverage on top of leverage. So they borrowed too much money on properties that just didn't have real value,
Hmm.
and then everything collapsed as as housing prices fell, and which really put a ripple effect through the financial markets. And I think that was a test. I was in the hedge fund industry where you go both long and short. And for many, I should say, actually, it was a proof that going long and short meaning hedging your risk. So it is a riskier product, but
Right.
the reason it's called hedge fund is you're also meant to hedge your risk. And for many of those that did, they actually not only protected their investors' capital, in some way, in many instances, they actually made money.
Hmm.
But it was also, again, for the industry at large, it was how do we, how do we learn from our mistakes, and how do we move forward knowing some of the mistakes we've made, and how do we make it better?
Hmm. So really, for everybody who loses money in any market, somebody's making it,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And when you're invested, everything that, even though one area, one sector loses, somewhere else is making it,
That's right.
right? It's always a balance.
That's right.
And I guess that's why they say you have to be diversified.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. Because if you put all your money in whatever it is, in that case, it was the stock market, you would have lost at that point, 28, I believe it was 27, 28%.
Hmm.
And so that is also why there are things different, we call them alternative investment products, things like different, even within the hedge fund industry, right? There's structured credit, there's corporate credit, there's activist funds, there's potpourri of different types of expertise.
What's an activist fund?
Bill Ackman is probably most well known for that. You take on, buy a certain number of shares, and then you have effectively control of the company. And so then you can make changes at the board level to how you want that company being run.
How you want it being run. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, but how you would have to have a lot of shares to be able
You
to do
do.
that.
You do.
Yeah.
There's a strategy behind doing that. I never worked on, but yes, exactly. You have to have a strategy behind, I'm going to acquire these shares, and you have to do it quietly and in
Right.
different ways, because obviously companies don't necessarily want that. Um,
So it's kind of like a takeover, but it's a soft takeover.
that's right. That's exactly right. And to your prior question, if you're invested in that, and maybe you're invested in private equity, and maybe you're invested in a short-oriented fund, you probably would have weathered the storm, but you certainly would have weathered the storm better than if you had just been long the U.S. equity markets.
Do you have any recommendations on what someone should do if they're like an early, maybe not a first time, maybe a first time investor, or maybe like just in the middle of their career or something like that? Is there like sectors that you should focus on, or should you buy the S&P, or what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think even taking a step back further from that, I think financial literacy is lacking in education system. I would strongly encourage, I'm on the board of Women Tomorrow, so we work with adolescent girls.
Yep.
I'd strongly encourage, starting at that age, to seek out financial literacy, whether that's through a mentorship, whether that's through through a mentor, whether that's through an online program, because the sooner you start investing your money, the faster it compounds.
Yeah, and that is one of the things we teach at Women of Tomorrow. One of the things we work with on our mentors all the time is financial literacy.
Yes.
With our girls. Well, so a young woman who wants to get into the financial industry like you did, what kind of advice would you give her?
I was fortunate in so much as I didn't know I would run business development at a hedge fund one day, but I did realized from a not reasonably young age, but before college, that I wanted to go into finance. I found it exciting. I'm a very rational person, and I like that it's a completely logical industry. And so I went to undergraduate business school, but you don't have to do that.
Okay.
I think having certainly financial literacy, but then also taking some classes in things like economics or finance or accounting, just so you understand the bread and butter of it, to see if that's something that interests you. And you can do that either if you attend college, you can do it at your college or at your university. You could also do that online. And that, I would say, is the most important thing to start your career, because if you are going to be in an industry in which you are speaking about financial products, you need to have a basic understanding of a balance sheet.
Yeah.
But then from there, the way I found my initial job, I went to, I'm proud to say I went to a university. I went to a good university, but I found my first job through networking. And I got the roster of every alumni who had graduated from my university, and I just started calling them.
Really?
I did.
And what did you say?
I said, I don't remember exactly, but something to the effect of, I'm attending, I went to WashU, Washington University in St. Louis. I'm attending WashU and WashU. This is my coursework. Here's my GPA. Here is what I am. Here are different career paths that I'm considering. I see that I personalized it. I see that you are in this industry. You're working here. Here's what interests me about that career. And surprisingly, I had a reasonably high response rate. And that is how I got my first job out of college.
That's pretty incredible. And where was your first job?
I worked at a private equity fund.
So it was someone who already worked there?
It was somebody who didn't work exactly there, but worked at a different private equity fund who connected me to them.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. That's, I believe that there's a lot of people out there that want to help other people, and especially, was it a woman or a man that helped you?
It was a man. Again, I know there are more women in this industry, but particularly back then, there were even less so.
Right.
So it was a man, but I think that's right. People want to help. You said earlier, what happened when you have to have thick skin. You're going to hear no a lot of the time, whether it's, trying to get a job, whether it's when you got your first job and you don't get the client you want, or you don't get the promotion you want. It's how do you move through that, hurdle or adversity, and, do better and get the outcome you want the next time.
For all the people who will tell you no, it only takes one person to tell you yes.
That's correct.
And then
I heard a lot of no's. So
yeah, for sure. No, we all have. And I'll tell you, we were talking about this earlier. One of the biggest things, you hear the buzzword resilience a lot these days, but the concept of resilience, of being able to get back up after you get knocked down, or being able to get back up after you've been disappointed and letting that disappointment go and moving forward, is, I think, like the hallmark of all successful people.
I completely agree. I think, we can call it resilience, we can call it grit, but it is picking yourself back up, whether it's a small no or a big no, but ultimately, recognizing there will be many of them in your life, and let's move forward. And what can I learn from this? and how can I do better next time?
Do you think some of the generations now, the younger generations getting out of high school, getting out of college now, do you think they're a little less resilient than previous years?
My experience with that age group is through my work with Women of Tomorrow and some of the other nonprofits I'm involved with.
Mm-hmm.
I think about this a lot with my own children. I have younger children,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something I want very much for them. And I do worry that as we potentially we are in a world where social media is prevalent. It's not saying anything that is novel here, but when I grew up, that barely existed.
Right.
And so now when you're in this world of social media, it's designed for you to hear things. It's an echo chamber, right? So you like something, you're interested in something, that social media, the algorithm is feeding you back information that further confirms that you're right,
Right.
or that empathizes with you. And that feels good. But in the real world, you're going to hear a lot of opposing views,
Yep.
a lot of different opinions, a lot of no's,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that are not going to you are not probably going to agree with. And you have to be able to have a civil discourse with the other person and find a productive outcome from that.
But it's the opposing views that make us grow.
I completely agree.
It's the opposition that makes us grow. It's
Yeah.
the being exposed to new ways of thinking that makes us grow. And if you're only hearing the things that you want to hear, which is what we hear on social media,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you'll never grow. You'll be the same for your whole life. You'll never get you'll never get anywhere, in my opinion. And I think that's even true. I think it's not even just true professionally, but I think it's also personally true for a lot of people. I see sometimes kids on Instagram or whatever, and they'll say, "Oh, I just had a date and he did this, and I'll never go there again," or
Yeah.
I walked out or something like that. But how many times have you met somebody and you didn't necessarily love them the first time you met them, but then they ended up becoming your best friend? Right? I mean, I know I had that happen a few times in my life
Yes. Yeah.
where there were people that really became my dearest friends, but the first time I met them, they kind of you know, put me off for one reason or another. I mean, you got to give people a chance. And I think the generations now, because of social media, are a little less likely to give people a chance, whether it's professionally or personally.
I think that's right. And I'll speak to professionally first. You will meet so many different people from so many walks of life
Mm-hmm.
who, again, you are going to hear things that you didn't know, that you disagree with, that, initially maybe even offend you. But
Right.
if you want to succeed in your career, whatever your career is, and I would say, I'll speak from finance, where again, it still is a male dominated
Right.
industry, you have to learn to find common ground and be able to learn from one another and move forward in a productive way.
Yeah.
And personally, yes, I very much think that's the case. I think you will have a hard time probably meeting a partner. Or if you're going to meet a partner, it's not somebody who maybe will challenge you and make you
Right.
expand your mind. Personally, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And just become a smarter, more enlightened, open-minded person that hopefully makes a difference in your family's life, hopefully in some semblance of the world, small way, a semblance of the world. So yes, I mean, I agree on both fronts from my experience, both, professionally and personally.
So now you transitioned from hedge funds to personal philanthropy. Why did you do that? Why'd you leave the hedge fund world?
So the short answer is family. The longer answer is I struggled with it for quite a long time because I was at the pinnacle of my career. And when you work so hard, and I'm sure you can relate to this,
Mm-hmm.
as a woman in particular, it's hard to leave that behind.
Yeah.
You think this defined my adulthood. Spent my entire adulthood building this career, and I got so much self realization from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, will I lose my identity if I retire? I ultimately came to terms with that because I realized that I could use my skill set, my know-how, and also open up the door to learning a lot more if I then transition it to something I'm familiar with, which is endowments and foundations and nonprofits, but from my own philanthropic giving, and still have time for being a mother, of which I am to 3 small children.
Yeah, you have 3 little kids,
I do.
right?
I do.
You have 1 boy and 2 girls,
Yeah.
right? So, and for those girls, we talked about, what you wish a little bit for those girls. I mean, but what about how you reflect with a young boy? How does that impact what you want him to learn about being with women as he grows up?
I am so glad he has 2 older sisters because I think he'll be the best husband for his future
There you go.
wife.
There you go.
I mean, everything from, they make him dress up. That's not why he's going to be an amazing husband in tutus, but, he's 3 and 4. But no, in all seriousness, I
Right.
think understanding a female's perspective and just being, most importantly, being respectful of the differences between boys and girls, of men and women.
Right.
And he innately, or inherently, not innately, inherently understand that,
Yeah.
given he is being bossed around by 2 sassy older sisters.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I know, like, I think sometimes my kids, I had such a long career in television and it felt like it was a different life, but my kids were really pretty small when I was in TV. And when I left, they were a little bit older, but probably don't remember a lot of it. So do you ever think, you had such a fabulous career and your kids really never got to see that?
I think about that a lot. And I thought about that a lot before I retired as well. I decided that I want to see them. I want for them to see me to work, excuse me. I want for them to see me in a leadership capacity.
Right.
And it does, of course, make me a little bit sad that they didn't see me in that career. But it doesn't mean that, for any woman or man, but I think particularly this is true for women who decide to have families, that you can't have a second act, and
Right.
that you can rather show leadership in other ways as well. And that's
So
what I'm
true.
doing with my family's philanthropy.
Absolutely so true. And I know another one of your issues, one of the things that you're very into besides women and girls is the environment.
Yes, very much.
Okay, so tell me your reflections on that. And
Yeah, sure. I grew up in the Midwest, as I mentioned, and surrounded by
me
nature.
too.
Yes, I know. I like something we have, one of the many things we have in common.
Yep.
And we spent almost all of our vacations in nature. I have such wonderful memories traveling to the mountains, camping in the mountains, being with wildlife, being in nature, and finding that both fun, but also made me a more fearless, person, in the sense that, when you're in nature, it can be very meditative and calming. And I also find that now, but also you're exposed to potential elements that you aren't otherwise exposed to in your, grass backyard. And so there was so much that nature gave me as a child. And I really want to protect that for future generations. And it's all the more meaningful now to me since I have children.
Right. And you live in South Florida in a very warm climate and
I do.
and a water climate, and your kids are still pretty little, but what do you do to expose them to nature?
That's a big reason why, I spent my professional career in New York City, which is, really the epicenter of finance.
And the anti-place of nature.
And the anti-place of nature. And that is exactly why we moved here.
Okay.
Because I wanted my children to be raised in nature. And, we are really at kind of, I don't know what you want to refer to it as, but, we are at the epicenter of any sort of environmental crises that occur, right? We are surrounded by water.
Right.
We, get hurricanes. And so helping to protect the environment, build climate. We use the word resilience. That's something we use with the climate now. With climate, let's build climate resiliency so that when there are hurricanes, which will be inevitable, when the sea levels rise, because it is inevitable that temperatures are rising, how do we protect nature and actually really protect humans, which, human health and climate health are very much intertwined. And so I spend, a lot of my time on that as well, whether that's helping to protect the Everglades, which there's only one Everglades in this world, and it's right in our backyard, to things like land conservation and making sure that we have enough land for, all the different species we have in this world and helping to protect them, making sure we have clean, helping to make sure we have clean water so we can all have enough water to drink that's clean and have access, everybody has access to it.
Oh, you know what I wanted to talk about a little bit? What I'd love to talk about with you is AI, because I know your husband started an AI company, right?
He did.
Yeah.
I'm a Luddite, but I will
You're a what?
I'm a Luddite.
What's a Luddite?
Oh, it means I have no technical capacity.
So
good thing I have a husband. Good thing I have a husband who's an AI expert.
I didn't even know the word. So I guess I'm more than a Luddite.
Anytime. That's good. We can be Luddites together. We can start our own tribe. Anytime I have a PC issue, a phone issue, he is also my technical support.
Okay.
But I probably know enough just to be dangerous.
Okay. But we all have an opinion on what AI is going to mean to the future, right? So what's your thinking? Where's that going to take the world?
Yeah, I do have an opinion. It is not an expert opinion because, again, I am a Luddite.
Okay.
But from what I have through osmosis, as well as gleaning some information from my husband, AI is obviously, it has transformed our world. It's going to continue to transform our world. I think there's a few key takeaways, particularly as I think about issues that are important to me, which is women and girls' education rights, as well as the environment. Certain jobs will be eliminated. They already have, and that will continue to be the case. So I think, as I think about my own children and these other areas of interest, understanding where humans can have and can continue to unlock value that AI will not be able to will be very important. And I'll give you an example. It's a simple example, but think about physical education. Physical education is extremely important to your health, to my health. And yes, AI can be helpful in telling you ways that you can be physically active or the right nutrients to take or supplements or the way to talk to a doctor. But in terms of actually doing the physical education and having somebody by your side to guide you on that, I think that will be, we're far many years away from AI taking over. Now, I'm not saying that is a higher education job. There are, other industries where we think that won't be an issue either. My husband's company is an AI software company. AI is not suddenly going to create a piece of software. It can help you with the inputs of it, but it's not going to create that software. I think there need to be guardrails for AI. I mean, I'm not saying something novel.
Right.
Like any industry, there have to be people who are the experts in the room need to get together and say, here are guardrails to protect humans. And I don't mean protect somebody who's going to be a robot on the the industrial cog, but I mean protect them from what AI could become, which could potentially be dangerous.
Like a task force of
AI experts, yes.
Yeah, but looking at the morality
Exactly. Yes.
AI and
Better
what
said.
AI can and cannot do.
Exactly. Exactly. Just like there's a Constitution of the United States, it's almost like a moral task force, or it's not exactly a constitution, but guidelines and parameters on how we implement and practice AI.
Like we need to put someone to like a philosopher to put together, the concepts of what non-humans, what their role should be in future societies. I
Yes.
mean, it's a whole interesting thing that we're sort of so not in touch with really as humans at this level, that it's, we're sort of moving blind through a potentially very dangerous area, but also through one that has so much great reward potential.
Completely. I mean, I think about just in my daily life how much this has made me so much more efficient.
Right.
Inversely, if I now, let's just use an example. I'm looking up something on, I don't know, let's say I wanted more information on Vizcaya, which is a historic house in Miami.
Right.
And I wanted to understand perhaps, of course, when it's built, you could Google that now, but when it was built, who built it, who inhabited it, and then, what are the potential impacts of sea level rise because it's on the water. And my questions start to become more complex. Well, historically, right, you would go into, going back, sounds ancient, but not that long ago, maybe just 2 decades ago, you would go into a library and you would find books on that. I mean, when I was growing up, we had encyclopedias on the library. And I know that's not relevant to much of this audience now, but I share that because there was a line of critical thinking and connecting those dots.
Totally. I totally agree with that.
And so when I talk about guardrails for AI, how do we preserve that? How do we preserve the critical thinking that comes along with how do we go from step A to step B to step C to step D? Because right now, AI connects all those dots for you. And you go from A to Z very quickly. And just spitting out an answer makes us robots. It doesn't make us smarter.
I 100% agree. And that's one of the things that I worry about all the time, too. I mean, one of the things that I always believed is you go to college, and the reason you go to college is because it trains you how to think.
Yes.
It trains you how to think differently.
Yes.
It exposes you, obviously, to a lot of different people and that sort of thing, but it really trains you how to look at the world differently and how to think differently. Law school, I think, is a good example of something that, totally teaches people how to think differently. Now I'm not so sure, because if you don't have to do the research, and do the analysis of that research to come to your own conclusions, and it's just being spit out by ChatGPT, I don't know what happens to the critical thinking ability or to that portion of our brain, for humans. And I worry about that a lot for young people. That's probably one of my greatest fears, is not even that AI would take over the world and, destroy humanity. My greatest fear is they would dumb us down, that it would dumb us down to such an extent that we don't have the ability to critically think anymore, and that we just take whatever answers AI gives us, rather than doing the work and figuring things out on our own.
I agree. And I think that speaking, going back to one of your earlier questions, what is the potential dangers of it? Again, going back to guardrails as well, how we teach has to evolve. Because if it is just tell me the answer and it's memorization, people are not going to be people that doesn't teach you anything. I agree with you. I think that is the purpose of higher education. And we very much need, more now than ever, critical thinkers who are thinking differently in an open-minded way. Again, this full circle, understanding that we are not, we're not going to think and herd think or group think.
Right.
That will endanger us to what AI could do to humanity.
And AI is doing it really in conjunction with social media.
Yes.
It's the same thing. You're being exposed to these consistent ideas over and over and over again, not because they're the newest, best, most interesting ideas, but because they're the ones that the AI algorithm, or that the algorithms have determined, you want to hear.
That you'll click on.
So you're never learning anything new. And then combine that with the fact that all you have to do, even the AI now, you can ask it a question and it will feed you the answer based on what it knows you like and want.
Yes, it knows it does know your preferences, and it exactly right.
You must tell AI, forget what you think I like, just give me the facts on something, because I've actually used it a couple times and come up with answers that I knew were incorrect.
Yes.
But you have to be able to critically look for all that stuff.
Yes, you cannot blindly just accept the answer.
So what do you see for the future for your young children? What do you think the world's going to be? Where do you think the jobs are going to be by the time your kids, well, forget because your kids have a long way to go. Where do you think the jobs are going to be? I always worry about for our girls at Women of Tomorrow. Not too long ago, we were teaching them, just STEM and, maybe be maybe be a coder. Now they're talking about the coding jobs are going to disappear, at least at the more basic levels. Where do you think the jobs are going to be in 5 or 10 years?
That is the trillion-dollar question now. In fact, my husband asked me that question the other day, and I said, "What? You're the AI expert. Don't make me panic. You need to tell me."
Right.
So the answer is I don't know because technology is changing so fast. I would say right now, if you are older than my children, if you are, in high school and moving into college, I think jobs in which it requires what we were talking about earlier, critical thinking, where being anything from being a lawyer, yes, you can check a document. You can scan a document through AI right now and say, tell me how fair or not this is based on case law in Florida or based on federal court law, right? You can do all that. But somebody has to write it to begin with, and somebody needs to understand the laws to be able to write it. And also, let's say you're a trial attorney, AI is not going to be on the stand talking to somebody on the stand, feeding you information. And it's real time. You have to respond in real time, right? So that all requires not only nuanced knowledge, but nuanced understanding of the law. I'm just focusing on that one because anything where you are in a real-time position, like my career in business development, where I'd sit across the table from the head of, Illinois State Retirement System, and you're explaining to them, okay, this is what your portfolio looks like today. Here's my XYZ hedge fund. Explain what my hedge fund does. How does it fit in your portfolio? And they're asking questions along the way. That is not something that AI anytime soon could replace. You could, make the argument, well, I can, talk to a robot over online and, will it be dynamic enough? We're not anywhere close to that at this point in time.
Do you think it'll impact the arts?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't given a lot of thought to that, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask. Other than the fact that one of our being my husband and I's very good friends, his wife is a reasonably famous digital artist, and thus far there is a lot of interest and success in that, but you can't replicate the masters, and I think we live in a world in which people want, where there's scarcity value. That's a real thing, scarcity value.
Yeah.
And there's only so many Monets created. There's only so many Picassos created.
Right.
There's only so many, whatever. Choose an artist in the last, couple hundred years.
Right.
And so digital art cannot replace that. So I don't think that is as much at risk. But it's creating a whole new industry of digital art, and that there is certainly a demand for that.
And we definitely live in a world where if it's common, nobody wants it.
Correct.
Yeah. Everybody wants what they can't have.
Yes.
Which is nothing new.
It is not. It is not.
Nothing
Yes.
new.
I read about fads from hundreds of years ago, and I think, really, that was what was popular? But there was the concept of scarcity value.
Any reflections on your own career that you would give advice to other young women or to your own daughters on either what you did right or what you would do differently?
Sure. It goes back to a topic we've discussed, which is resilience, grit, and perseverance. You will be knocked down. I was knocked down many times in my life, whether it's being made fun of on the playground or not getting into the college you want, or, getting that C on a paper. And then as you move into the professional world, dealing with a whole different set of people who have, again, different opinions, different views, different demands of you that you've never had to, meet before.
Right.
And I think having self-confidence, finding a way to move through it productively and cooperatively, and also the inner desire to do that will get you very, very far in life. It's will. A lot of it is your own will. Yes, you need to be, you need to just work hard, but that comes along with will. You need to work hard. You need to study hard. You need to, have an education. But after that, a lot of it is your own will. In terms of things I would do differently, it is perhaps in moments where I did doubt myself. And sometimes I think back to some of those moments and, where it ended up taking a step back in my career, or a step back in some ways just meant like it took longer to get to where I wanted to be.
Right.
And sometimes you need to take a pause. But I also think, having confidence in yourself, along with getting wise outside counsel, is very important. Because again, groupthink or herdthink is not useful. Understanding different perspectives and, really listening to that and understanding, okay, well, this is what I could have done differently, and I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna learn from that, and I'm gonna move forward.
So true. So you have negotiated things at the very highest level in the very highest circles. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's negotiating their salary for the first time?
So I think, firstly, you need to understand what are your peers making. You need to do research. You do research and understand what are your peers making? What is the industry paying? What is the industry paying? What are your peers making based on your experience? That's just basic. But from there, it is understanding what are your unique qualities that you bring to the table. And you don't even necessarily need to lead with that, but know that.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm.
What's the worst they're going to say? No? So, and when they do say no, then maybe that's when you present, well, here's my unique skill set and what I think I can bring to the table, and here's what I think I can deliver for you. And be confident in that.
Mm-hmm.
But just don't be afraid to hear the word no and say, okay, I will revisit this with you in 6 months when I've delivered these items for you.
So at what point in your career did you have something that maybe you felt very uncertain about, but you had to persevere anyway? Like I would imagine during 2008 when the market was crashing, that must have given you some uncertainty.
It certainly did. But, I think back even earlier in my career, because when you start a career, obviously everything is new. You're drinking water through a fire hose, right? And so It's just, there's so much information you're trying to absorb. And I remember my second job after my first hedge fund job, when I worked at Bridgewater Associates. And I felt very fortunate to get the position. Although I had confidence in my abilities, everybody else they hired went to Harvard and Dartmouth, and I went to WashU, which is a top tier school, but not Harvard or Dartmouth.
Right.
And there was moments of self-doubt when I was, I was taking course. Part of the requirements of being an analyst there is you're taking an investment associate course, and on top of your daily responsibilities. And I thought, am I prepared for this? And maybe I'm not, but I'm just going to work that much harder and spend my weekends or any time needed to learn the information and excel and rise above.
Mm-hmm. I worry with my own kids sometimes. They haven't won enough. You know what I mean? You have to lose. You definitely have to lose.
You do.
But you also have to know what it's like to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't, I say they haven't won enough. I feel like you gain resilience by struggling and then just saying, I'm just going to go through this. And now all of a sudden you make it out on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what breeds confidence, is the being on the brink of failure
Yep.
and saying no, failure is not an option,
Correct.
and just pulling yourself through, right?
Yep. Yep, that's right. That's right. That is really what gives you the most confidence. Is knowing that this really may not work out. This really may not. But I'm going to try my absolute hardest, and just willing yourself to do it. I've been in that situation many, many times.
Yeah.
And, there were certainly moments where I thought maybe I shouldn't do this because I was giving up a lot. I gave up, I had basically no personal life. I would spend 14 hours at the office, and then on the weekends I would spend my time studying.
Yeah.
But I did it.
Yeah.
And that not only felt really good, but it's what, ultimately advanced my career.
Learning delayed gratification.
Yes.
Delayed gratification. If, I have a sign somewhere about most people give up the things they really want for the things they just want today.
Very true.
Yeah.
Can I have that sign when my children want candy?
There you go. You got it. You've got candy issues today. Who knows what the issues are going to be tomorrow?
Maybe
right?
2 pieces of candy.
There you go. So is there a mistake that you would tell young women not to make financially?
I think the biggest mistake you can make is to not invest. Now, I'm not suggesting tomorrow you go out and put all of your money on Apple, but I am suggesting that invest in the broad indices, invest in the S&P 500, invest in gold, invest in, a 60-40 portfolio, meaning 60% equities, 40% bonds. But you can just do that through a mutual fund or just buying the index. But when you don't invest, you are losing money because there's, we go through different periods of inflation, but there's always some inflation. And so if you're not invested, you are literally losing money every single day.
And what's the safest? Probably the S&P?
I mean, conventional wisdom is a 60-40 portfolio.
Okay.
60% equities, 40% bonds.
Let us know one thing from today's episode that resonated with you and send it to us on my social media at Jennifer Valoppi or in the comments, and we'll post and read your responses to hopefully help other women who might have missed some of the content. Now, every episode we do here ends with a micro action, something very simple that you can do now to improve your life and move yourself forward. Today's micro action is to have the honest conversation with someone about something you've been avoiding. Clarity may feel a little scary in the moment, but silence costs a lot more in the long run. And remember that every step you take takes you one step closer to your future. Finally, we support the Women of Tomorrow Mentor and Scholarship Program, as we've been telling you, and the thousands of young women who are served through our program through mentorship, education, and access to opportunity. So if this conversation inspired you, please subscribe. You can again follow me on social media at Jennifer Valoppi. You can learn more about Women of Tomorrow at womenoftomorrow.org. You can also donate there, and your donation can help us change the world one young woman at a time. Thanks for listening.